Life changes in an instant. One moment you're fine, the next, someone else's negligence has turned everything upside down. And when that happens, you need fighters in your corner. NACE Law Group has been standing up for DC families for decades, taking on medical malpractice, wrongful death, and serious injury cases that others won't touch. While other firms rush to settle, NACE fights for maximum compensation. They know your family deserves justice, and they won't stop until you get it. If you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's mistake, don't wait. Call NACE Law Group today. Visit nacelawgroup.com. That's NACE lawgroup.com. Join Move for Meals, a month-long fitness and fundraising challenge supporting food and friends. This October, you can walk, run, or bike wherever you are to help neighbors living with serious illnesses. Every $10 you raise provides one medically tailored meal delivered right to someone's home. With weekly wellness themes and fun challenges, Move for Meals is a chance to meet your fitness goals while fueling compassion in our community. Sign up today and make every step count at p2p.onecause.com/moveformeals or visit foodandfriends.org.
Today on CityCast DC, it is no secret that DC is facing like holy hell on Capitol Hill. But are the city's leaders doing all they can to advocate for themselves in front of a Congress that seems to despise self-government in the district? A lot of people say, no. DC Councilmember Christina Henderson is a former Hill staffer herself. She joined us to talk through the 14 and counting congressional bills currently targeting the district, and to talk about Eleanor Holmes Norton's poor performance last Wednesday, and to talk about whether Mayor Muriel Bowser and the rest of our elected officials are up to this unprecedented challenge. And hey, after the interview, we've got Katrina Mathis from Food and Friends here to tell us about their Move for Meals program, which is a great way to connect to neighbors in need in DC. So stay tuned. Today is Monday, September 15th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Councilmember.
Hey, how are you?
Good. It's nice to see you.
I know. It's good to see you as well.
So you are like that rare creature in city politics. You're somebody who has worked both sides of the street, working national politics on the Hill and working in it now as a member of the DC Council, which I think gives you a particularly interesting perspective on the current situation between the district and Congress. I was in the room when the House Oversight Committee marked up 14 DC-related bills on Wednesday. There was a lot of DC folks in the audience who were very critical of these bills. Is there any of them that jump out at you as particularly bad, or for that matter, good?
It actually ended up being 16 bills at the end of the day, because there were 2 bills that were added literally at like the 9th hour of this markup. I think the bills sort of range from absurd to dangerous in a variety of different capacities. I think the bill that would criminalize homelessness in the district is particularly cruel and egregious. To fine someone $500 or imprison them for up to 30 days for being homeless doesn't address the actual underlying issue of them not having a place to go. And I feel like if we are really going to be policymakers talking about real solutions, there are other meaningful ways that the Congress could help on the housing issue, not just in the District of Columbia, but across the country.
There's also a measure that would require cash bail in the district and require pretrial detention for certain charges, which is not just against DC policy for like 20 years, but is really against how many states and the federal court system do it.
For sure. I mean, so DC's cash bail law is near identical to the federal law, which essentially says that a judicial officer can't impose a financial penalty on you that is essentially going to result in your detainment. This has been in the effect since 1984, right? There's nothing, though, in DC law that says our judges can't impose cash bail to ensure appearances. We just don't typically use it as practice, because usually if your crime is so egregious and heinous that we believe that you are a public safety risk, you are going to be detained pre-trial, regardless of whether or not you are wealthy or poor. And I feel like that is a better way to do things. But even during the markup on Wednesday, there were members of Congress who were raising potential constitutionality questions about their law, or excuse me, their bill rather, which would essentially say you must be detained pre-trial simply based on your charge.
And I think limiting discretion seems like a common denominator here, that one of the things one of the proposals would get rid of DC's elected attorney general. That's not that old a position. It's only been elected for, 20 years or something?
Yeah, we didn't vote on it till 2010.
Right. But before that, it was appointed from the city government. The change would have the president of the United States appoint the city's top lawyer.
Without Senate confirmation. Let's add that part to it so people understand just how ridiculous this would be. Because if this bill were to pass, number one, not only is it taking away a part of elected democracy and our very, very, very small, limited amount of home rule that we do have, but it would essentially make the president of the United States the chief legal officer of the district, controlling all civil and criminal matters. Not only would the president be picking the prosecutor, right? Because he would be picking the attorney general, he would be picking the U.S. attorney. He picks all the judges already.
Mm-hmm.
Right? DC Superior Court, although they deal with local issues, DC Superior Court is a federal agency. It's a federal, or they operate within the federal court system. So it's not us. So the only place in the justice system in the District of Columbia that DC actual residents would have a role and a say would be on juries.
The measure I thought was most sort of on a day-to-day level potentially disruptive to how our government does its job is, right now there is a requirement that every bill that you guys pass on the council have a period of congressional review when Congress can spike it. And that would extend this to mayoral executive orders. That seems like, first of all, I don't know the difference between an executive order and the mayor just telling someone who works for her to do something. But like it just, if you're thinking about running any organization, having to wait 60 days before your orders get obeyed seems like a pretty cumbersome. What's the argument against it?
Well, it would basically grind the district operations down to a halt. So right now, current law, it's 30-day congressional review for most bills, 60 days if it's dealing with the criminal code. Okay. What people don't realize, though, is that the congressional review days only count if Congress is actually in session. And you said this earlier, right? Like, because I've worked up there, they take a fair amount of district days or recess days. And in fact, the Congress these days, the last few years, have averaged only about 147 days in session. So if I have to wait 60 days, but you're only there for 147 days, and you're going to limit my ability to be able to pass emergency legislation, to be able to respond quickly to things that arise, typically in municipal governments and state governments, et cetera, it essentially renders DC government, you're going to be calling us ineffective and inefficient.
Because you're going to be ineffective and inefficient.
Because we will be ineffective and inefficient because we literally cannot do the things that need to be done. Or it will require us to have these strong mental gymnastics of trying to get around needing legislation in order to accomplish what we want to accomplish, which is also weird because it would put us on some shaky legal footing on some of these different things. But, I think you talked about sort of the overturning mayor orders. This would also give them a line item veto of the DC budget, which, our budget process is a months long endeavor, right? Hundreds and hundreds of DC residents testify. We've got marathon hearings that go on, all of these different things. The idea that a congressman from Pennsylvania can just come in and be like, you know what? I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm not going to seek to understand. I'm not going to talk to any residents. I don't like the name of this grant program that I think does this other thing. And so I'm just going to put this up for veto. Unbalance the budget, but also it's our money. It would be one thing if it's federal dollars, but we're talking about a budget for which the federal government's funding for DC is only about 25%.
Is there anything in these measures that if like a DC council colleague had proposed it, you would think like that's okay? I might support that.
Of these bills? No. Because the one question I would have, and the question I would also, pose to these members of Congress is like, what specifically is the problem that you are trying to solve? But are you, in some cases, you're taking a hatchet when a scalpel could probably be used in advancing some of these measures. Like, for instance, there is one bill that would repeal the Second Chance Amendment Act as well as the Incarceration Reduction Act. And for listeners, the Second Chance bill is essentially, it cleans up the process for record sealing and record expungement, particularly when there is no conviction on record. So, an arrest record can stop you from employment and it can stop you from housing, regardless of whether or not the prosecutor even chose to prosecute the case. The record still exists. And the Incarceration Reduction Act basically says for individuals who were convicted of a crime when they were 16 or 17 years old, this gives you an opportunity to petition for a judge after you have served a significant amount of time to be able to take a look at your case, take a look at your record while you have been serving in prison, and recommend perhaps a sentence reduction. Most of the individuals who benefit from IRA, which is the acronym that we use to call it, they're in their 40s and they have served, upwards of 25, 30 years in prison. Why do we need to repeal this? What is the issue you're trying to solve, especially since the vast majority of the men who have been released through the IRA process have not done any crimes, right? They have, in fact, dedicated their lives in many cases to working with young people so that young people don't make the same mistakes that they made, when they were younger, right? They are the credible messengers that we want in community. But you have convinced yourself that record sealing and the ability to petition for a review is somehow causing all of this crime that's happening in the district, when in fact it's not.
I'm wondering, you've watched your share of congressional hearings over the years. What'd you think of the one on Wednesday? Like how it went, how the Democrats comported themselves, how the Republicans comported themselves?
This is, I think, what the hard part is for me as someone who is a policy wonk. And, I enjoy my fair amount of politics as well. I don't like politics being played with real people's lives in this way, right? Just to score political points. And it is incredibly frustrating that you have 16 bills that have not had a hearing. They don't have a shred of analysis. There has not been a single witness who resides in the District of Columbia who's been able to testify about this. There's no legal sufficiency. There's no physical impact. And we don't really have a voice in that matter. And I found myself last week while I was watching, I was like yelling at my TV screen because I was like, no, guys, there is a counterpoint to this. And, I can't text a member of Congress to be able to say like, hey, say this thing. But I can only imagine like if council members, actual DC government officials were on the other side, would that markup have gone the same way in terms of, I feel like, points that were made by Republicans simply going unanswered? Because we have a greater knowledge of the bills and what is actually happening and practicing on the ground.
I spent most of the day of the hearing in that room.
Oh, you stayed?
I stayed. And, Eleanor Holmes Norton, DC's delegate, her office had alerted media she was going to speak on all 14 bills. And, given a lot of the talk about Delegate Norton's age, this seemed like news, right? This is DC's warrior on the Hill. She was going to be up there warrioring. And yes, she used her allotted 5 minutes on each measure. But unlike a lot of the other Democrats, she did not get into it with the Republicans on the committee, didn't engage with debates. She read from prepared remarks. She was reading slowly, and it looked like with some difficulty in some cases. When Scott Perry, the Pennsylvanian who introduced those measures about the red light cameras and the right turns, she didn't say anything about those, I think because they were not on the agenda in advance. And given that you were at home shouting at your TV, and I think probably a lot of other people in your position were too, is this a problem that the person who knows more than everyone else in the room about DC combined is really not able to be a full participant?
Yes. The simple answer is yes. Yes, it is. There were a number of times where I felt like, oh, this would have been an excellent point to be able to push back on some things. I think Representative Higgins from Louisiana at one point was sort of waxing poetically about how pretrial detention is not that bad because it's only for 2 weeks. And, an offender would have an opportunity for them to sit and, reflect on their lives. And this might be the only time they could think of that.
Get sober, he said.
Yeah, get sober and all these other things. And I'm like, okay, you are telling me you don't actually understand anything about what's happening in the court system, because if you had known, because of our judicial vacancy problem, right, 25%, pretrial detention and cases are now taking up to a year or more to even go to trial. That's a long time for you to sit and reflect on an allegation, particularly for a low-level nonviolent offense. That was what the conversation was. And, Representative Norton isn't an attorney. She's an attorney.
She's not just an attorney, she's a very good trial lawyer.
A very good, I feel like if we were having this debate 5 or 10 years ago, that the other side of that hearing room would have been very spicy on that. And I think this is also just sort of some of the overall issues and dramas that we have in terms of DC lacking statehood is, I know that members of Congress are busy. I know that there might be multiple hearings that are going on at one time, or you have constituents who are visiting from your states or otherwise. But one of the things that was really frustrating to me is that we really just had a difficulty in terms of attendance, making sure that there was a Democrat to be in the room to even say anything, to hear some of the arguments that were coming from the other side. And I know, I don't know, people viewed markups in very different ways, but it feels very defeating to essentially have to beg a member from another state, hey, I need you to speak for the District of Columbia.
Right. Particularly when our own member is silent for much of the day.
Yes. But, I've said before, Michael, right, like that's not a decision I can make. That is a decision that she will have to make. And frankly, it will be a decision of DC voters in the next year. I feel like, what is this, month 9? We just started month 9 of this administration. And it's a long way to go until November 2026. These attacks on the District of Columbia, I don't see are going to stop anytime soon. And so we're going to have to strongly consider what does it look like and what type of representation we want to have up there.
I'm curious, your name gets talked about sometimes, and you're somebody who's had experience up there and understands the sort of ebb and flow of things. Is that a job you would be interested in? And I know it'd be a politically complicated thing given you're an independent, but is it something you'd be interested in and are thinking about?
It's not necessarily something I'm thinking. Part of it, though, I think is that I feel like I would be very frustrated up there because
you and 435 other members.
But right, I went into public service because I didn't go into public service to maintain the status quo. I went into public service to really try to be a problem solver and a changer. Being the delegate from DC is a different type of role. I am a registered independent. I have to be a registered independent in order to have my current seat on the DC Council. And so, no, I can't run in a Democratic primary. And so that's just something that I do think about. But I do feel like in the next few months, there is going to be a very public conversation. And I'm sure there have already been rallying cries from members of the public around we need a new generation of leadership for the challenges that we're going to be facing in the next coming years. And so I'm never going to say never. And I certainly appreciate people putting my name out there. But yeah.
Did you know that the Library of Congress is free and open late on Thursdays? Live at the Library connects you to library collections and elevates happy hour in one of DC's most gorgeous spaces with eclectic live entertainment. Seriously, they've even hosted circus performers from Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. Check out loc.gov/live, and you'll find a costume party, a film screening of All About Eve with Bette Davis, throwing all the withering barbs, pop science author Mary Roach, and SNL alum Kate McKinnon. And that's just in the next couple weeks. Discover what Live at the Library has in store for you and your next night out. Visit loc.gov/live to see upcoming events and register for free tickets. For nearly 40 years, Food and Friends has delivered hope and health across the D.C. region with home-delivered, medically tailored meals for neighbors living with serious illnesses like HIV/AIDS, diabetes, cancer, and more. This October, you can be part of that mission by joining Move for Meals, a month-long fitness and fundraising challenge. Walk, run, or bike wherever you are. Track your time exercising via the fitness app Strava and raise funds for neighbors in need. Every $10 you raise provides one medically tailored meal, ensuring that more people facing serious illnesses receive the nutrition that they need to heal. Help us reach our goal of 20,000 meals. Sign up today at p2p.onecause.com/moveformeals or visit foodandfriends.org and help us deliver hope and health one meal at a time. This podcast is brought to you by Wise, the fastest and most affordable way to use your money around the globe. With Wise, you can send, spend, and receive up to 40 currencies with only a few simple taps and save up to 55% compared to major banks. Plus, Wise won't add hidden fees to your transfer. Whether you're buying souvenirs with pesos in Puerto Vallarta or sending euros to tip your Colosseum tour guide, you know you're getting a fair exchange rate with no extra markups. Wise offers 24/7 live support and runs over 7 million daily checks to catch and prevent fraud, so you know your money is where it's supposed to be. Be smart. Join the 15 million customers who choose Wise. Download the Wise app today or visit wise.com/US/compare. Terms and conditions apply. What do you think the mayor could be doing to be more effective, or is she sort of maxed out her effectiveness?
I mean, I think it's, I don't want to say maxed out in terms of effectiveness, but there are 535 members of Congress. There is one mayor of Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
Does she have the time to give every one of them time on whatever their particular issues are, right? Right now, we're just sort of talking about timing and economies of scale. But I do feel like we all need to get better in terms of getting tighter around our communications, because there were a few instances in that markup where Republicans were using statements that the mayor made in the past in support of some of the measures and the efforts that they were trying. So, yeah.
I mean, it's tough, right? Because this is a democracy. So people are going to disagree in the council. The mayor is going to disagree with the council about stuff. The council might pass it anyway. Should she be biting her tongue because in a couple of years, someone on the Hill might use that to try to undo the bill?
No, I mean, I think you have to say what you're going to say. But I also feel like in some cases we have to be mindful. And where we can, I think now is the time for one band, one sound. If we're all fighting for the same thing, which is holding on to our home rule and stopping the imposition of policy without any participation of those who are actually going to be governed through that policy. So,
well, it looks like she and Brian Schwab have, I mean, maybe without intentionally doing this, have a sort of good cop, bad cop routine going.
I don't know if it's necessarily good cop, bad cop, but this is what happens when you have an independent AG.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I get emails from people about, you need to tell Attorney General Schwab to bring this case or drop this case or
Mm-hmm.
otherwise. That's not my job. That's not my role.
Right.
He is the Attorney General. He has very qualified and talented staff who are making the determinations about how they want to move forward. Sometimes the timing is not perhaps the best, but other times, right, he feels like these are cases that need to be made. And it gets difficult, especially when you're dealing with some of these rescissions that are occurring. And this kind of goes back to that, the bill that they want to say, like, oh, the president would appoint the attorney general. That would essentially mean that the District of Columbia would never be able to bring suit against the federal government.
Have you had any discussions with either of them about this?
About which one?
About the 14 bills and strategies to oppose them.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if nothing else, this has certainly increased the conversation about amongst the various parts of the government. And, it is really a strategy session. If we do
Right.
not believe that all 16 bills are going to actually wind their way through the process, let's do the matrix. What are the most dangerous? And let's fight on those, because fighting on 16 is very, very difficult.
I know that during the initial days of the takeover, the mayor's inclination and I think explicit suggestion to some members of council was don't say anything. And that wasn't really going to work because like the whole Democratic Party was already saying things.
Correct.
So, you know, I don't know that that's a values divide, but there's a sort of tactics divide that has shown up sometimes.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say that there are a lot of people, not just in district government, but I would say that this is the same for national Democrats. I would say Schumer and Jeffries and their caucuses are having to have the same conversations with themselves. What happened in the first Trump administration is completely different from what we are dealing with today.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are still thinking about, oh, well, during Trump 1, we were able to do this and the courts were there and they were disorganized and all of these different things happened. And in the case of DC, there are a lot of people who keep coming back to like, well, in the first Trump administration, you know, Mayor Bowser would fight back and do all of these things. She planted Black Lives Matter on, you know, on the plaza and all this other stuff. And it was like, yeah, and you know what was different there? Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House.
Right. Right.
Right. We had a Congress who actually wanted to exert its power in the three branches of government. And we had a judicial system that was also willing to do its part in pushing back. What we have seen happen thus far in these first 8 to 9 months of this administration, and those two things don't seem to be true anymore. So you got to move differently.
So it's a tricky thing. You run for an office like mayor of Washington or attorney general of the District of Columbia because you want to like administer a city government or whatever. And then because of the unique situation of the District of Columbia, you have this other job where you have to be an advocate for your city in terms of federal legislation vis-a-vis the Congress and relations with the White House. How do you think the city's, I mean, I know the city has recently hired lobbyists to help with this, but how do you think, besides Delegate Norton, how have Mayor Bowser and Attorney General Schwab handled that part of the job, the part that maybe they never asked for?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could certainly do better on all fronts. But then it's a question of better to what extent, because I do feel like the White House, you know, every day is a new day with them. And so when you feel like you have made progress, you know, on Monday, by Thursday, they're going to kneecap you. And it's not just this particular administration. There have been in the past, right? Barack Obama famously trading DC in an appropriations fight. And so,
and it was his to trade legally.
It was, but it's sort of like everybody uses DC as this bargaining chip. And so it feels like sometimes whack-a-mole. Yeah. Because yes, I got to deal with the day-to-day issues of the things that are coming on right this week. The council will be out of recess. We have some actual municipal things that we need to take care of at our legislative meeting on Wednesday. I would have loved to have spent this entire week focused on the bills that are going to be coming before the actual council, but I am writing talking points and, you know, having, you know, trying to get meetings with members of Congress, and we're going up to the Hill and we're doing all of these different things. It's certainly another side of it in a way that the district hasn't had to do before. And perhaps we need to do more to do that type of relationship building with members of Congress so that they may still vilify us, but it wouldn't be so easy to do so when you have actually had coffee and conversations without the cameras with folks. And so I think there's still more work that we need to do in building up that federal partnership, not just with the agencies who we work with often, but now with Congress.
So historically, one of like when they were first pushing for home rule, one of the tools or weapons DC was able to use was to talk to people in members of Congress's districts and say, listen, you know, you sent this guy up to Washington to pass tax bills or whatever, and he's wasting his time and your money jerking around with like red light cameras in a city far away. And it's not a good look for most members of Congress. Is that part of the sort of political battle something that people are doing or thinking about?
Oh my gosh. So a couple of weeks ago, I had joked to a group of friends of mine that I was going to start a podcast called Do You Know What Your Congressman Did Last Week? And it was solely going to be dedicated to exposing this is how they're spending their time. And again, to your point, it would the aim around statehood. Like your biggest press release that you sent out this week was about a DC bill. I wonder if some of these members in, like, say, North Carolina, do you know that your congresswoman introduced a bill to expand school vouchers for DC kids? Just DC. Didn't do it for y'all. Just in the District of Columbia, right?
Right.
Like, I feel like, when there are actual issues going on in terms of inflation and gun violence and housing cost, and, climate resilience and all of these different things that are going on, I don't know, maybe I still will start that podcast. Just one time a week, just a rundown of here are all the ways in which you are not functioning on the actual business. But what I think, though, is that for some of these members, when you have given up so much of your power, right? You've given up the power to legislate. You've given up the power to actually conduct any real meaningful oversight. When so much is about, can I get a viral clip on cable news? When it comes to these types of things, you're just looking for, like, what is the low hanging fruit? And very unfortunately, DC is just kind of there as a punching bag. And I feel like because in sort of the national media lexicon, every time they're talking about Washington as this swamp that needs to be drained and all of the corruption and things like that is taking place, people have just assumed that it is talking about the whole district as opposed to just talking about what's happening on the federal government side. And I don't think a lot of people realize that there are 700,000 people who live in the District of Columbia, many of whom have nothing to do with the federal government, and they are just trying to live their lives and get the slice of the American dream like everybody else.
So let's just talk quick about where this goes from here. I think a lot of people in D.C. who follow the Congress assume that, crazy House stuff is always going to die in filibuster in the Senate. Is that a safe assumption?
I don't know if it's safe, but it's definitely an assumption that I have been working with. They will need 7 Democratic votes in order to be able to pass these bills. But you have to also add that they would need time. Now, I haven't been in the Senate as a staffer in a little bit of time here, but I would find it very hard to believe that Senator Thune would give 16 bills related to the District of Columbia time on the Senate floor. It would clog them up for months of them not actually being able to get anything done. Do I think he might pick a couple? Maybe.
And could they fold it into the budget process where you're not subject to filibuster?
They could, but then how are you going to get the budget passed? You still need 60 votes. I think that's one of the things that we're, September 30th funding deadline is around the corner. And the question that's happening right now is there going to be a shutdown? Now, do I feel like there's probably a deal to be had? Maybe there is. But if you start putting poison pills like these types of DC related bills, you make it incredibly difficult for some of the members who might be okay to vote for a clean appropriations bill and not feel like they have to fight it.
But I imagine it's also hard for a Democrat to go back to their constituents who also don't live here and say, hey, I'm going to blow this up because of a city you don't live in, for the same reason that your podcast would expose what they're doing.
Yeah, but I think the little difference here is that because there have been signals by Republicans of, hey, we're just starting in DC. We plan to do this in other places, right? And we've seen that happen in terms of National Guard troops being threatened to be sent to Chicago and Baltimore and these other places. And I feel like for some of these folks now, they're thinking, if I don't pay attention to what's happening in DC, we could potentially be next. But I also feel like for some of these public safety bills, they have national implications, right? I don't know how you run and call yourself a Democrat today and vote for a bill to impose cash bail. Right? I don't know how you say that you are a compassionate progressive and vote to criminalize homelessness in the nation's capital. I don't know how you say that you are for meaningful solutions on public safety and for youth involvement, and you vote to lower the age of kids being tried as adults to 14. Like, some of these bills are just hustling backwards. And so, yes, if you are a Senate Democrat who may be in a moderate state or a difficult reelection situation, I know that this is going to put you in a tough place. But guess what? They're going to call you weak on crime regardless of what you do, because that's been the playbook since the 1980s, right? But are these red lines for you? Like, deeply in terms of your values, are these red lines? And most of your staff, particularly in the DC offices, are going to have to live under these regimes.
So before I let you go, you mentioned council's back this week. What's big on your agenda?
There's a lot of stuff that's going on, but the biggest one that we have to address is around immunizations. So, as you know, I chair the council's Committee on Health. The CDC made some changes as it relates to the COVID-19 vaccine. And so right now, district residents are having a difficult opportunity getting access to that vaccine at pharmacies in the district without a prescription. And so the council will be voting on emergency legislation that hopefully resolves a little bit of that. But that's something that's certainly on our list. We have some hearings that are coming up on a variety of different issues, including permanent supportive housing and supports around mental health issues. We've got some hearings coming up on 988 and crisis response, which is super important in terms of the public health ecosystem, and a few other things as well. So it's going to be a busy fall. We're also voting as a council. Wednesday will be our second vote on the RFK stadium legislation. And we have some housing bills that are on the floor as well. So a lot of things going on.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And of course, keeping an eye of what's happening on the Hill, because this week, the chairman of the council, the attorney general, and Mayor Bowser will be testifying before the House Oversight Committee.
Councilmember, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And listen, if you start that podcast, come back and play us some excerpts. And listener, don't go anywhere. In just a second, we've got Katrina Mathis, who is the Director of Volunteer Services at Food and Friends, here with CityCast's Annie Reese to tell us about Food and Friends' current program, Move for Meals. So stay tuned.
Hello, Executive Producer Annie Reese here with Katrina Mathis, Director of Volunteer Services at Food and Friends. Hi, Katrina.
Hi, Annie. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. I'm so happy to be talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So Food and Friends has been serving the DC area for almost 40 years. Can you give me a quick snapshot of the mission and the work that you do?
As you said, for nearly 40 years, Food and Friends has been preparing and delivering home-delivered, medically tailored meals and medically tailored groceries to neighbors living with serious illnesses like cancer, HIV/AIDS, poorly controlled diabetes, COPD, sickle cell, and a host of other life-challenging illnesses. We believe that food is medicine, anyone can get sick, and everyone can help.
And this fall, you're launching Move for Meals. Can you give me the idea behind it, and how can people take part?
So Move for Meals is a month-long fitness and fundraising challenge. It will start October 1st. It will run through November 1. The great part about it is anyone can participate. If you can walk, if you can run, if you can bike, you can do this on your own schedule wherever you are. And so what we're doing is, in order to register is $30, and you have a $200 fundraising goal. And that may sound like a lot. It really may sound like a lot. However, if you break it down into bite-sized pieces, it's not too much. Let me just tell you this. So at Food and Friends, again, we feed people battling serious illnesses. Mm-hmm. Every $10 raised is one medically tailored meal. Okay, so $30 is a full day of meals for a client, and $200 is a week's worth. Okay, so if you had 20 friends and you asked them all to support you with a $10 donation, you'd hit your $200 fundraising goal like that. And so I'm excited about it. This is our first endeavor into this virtual walkathon. And then what you do is you track your movements. We're recommending that you use Strava. That's a popular fitness app. It connects with our event platform, which is called One Cause. So you can see your activity and you can compare it with others, but you can use your iPhone or whatever. This is an honor system. We want people to just get out and move. And while you're doing that, help us, help this cause.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is kind of the definition of the adage, many hands make light work, right?
That's a great one. Definitely. We consider ourselves a community of neighbors helping neighbors. So we're just helping each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, as you say, for people who are sick or in need, food is often the first thing that goes out the window. So for folks listening who want to get involved, what's the best way they can sign up?
For anyone who wants to take part in this, visit our website at foodandfriends.org. First of all, you're going to learn a whole lot about us. We are a really great organization that has a great mission that's easy to get behind. But you can also look for Move for Meals while you're there. You can register. Again, it's $30 to register, a $200 fundraising goal. If people also want to get involved with Food and Friends beyond Move for Meals or in addition to Move for Meals, visit our website again at foodandfriends.org and you can volunteer with us. We are a volunteer-dependent organization. We were started by volunteers, and volunteers are the lifeblood of our organization. So we have lots of opportunities in our kitchen or delivering to our clients for volunteers to get involved in. We also are working toward another Thanksgiving, which is our Super Bowl. Thanksgiving is our largest event of the year, and we need lots of volunteers to make it a success. So there are lots of ways to get involved with Food and Friends, and we are happy for all the support we can get.
Katrina, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Annie. I sincerely appreciate it.
Listeners can go to moveformealsdc.org to learn more. We'll have that link for you in our show notes as well, so you're just a click away. Thanks for listening.
And that's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. And become a member. It's only $10 a month, and you get great perks and get to support conversations like this one. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.